there. Welcome to Granny Rocks. I'm your host, Beth Green, otherwise known as Granny Rocks, and
I'm your co-host, Sweet Baby James Maynard.
Otherwise known as Sweet Baby James Maynard. And tonight I'm going to talk about when they become you or us, dealing with problems you thought happened only to other people. But first, let's have James introduce our show, shall we?
Oh, yes, indeed. You have come to Granny Rocks with Beth Green, co-hosted by me, James Maynard. And in this show, we'll have the opportunity to, once again, experience Granny's wit, wisdom, and uncommon sense. And yes, we have changed our name again. Granny, would you like to explain the name change?
Yes. Well, okay. We were originally called Granny Rocks Our World. Then we changed it to Inner Revolution, changing the world from the inside out. And I woke up this morning and I started feeling a different energy. I keep changing the name as it feels like the focus of the show changes, along with the need. We don't have to get stuck as one thing. We go with the flows, whatever the need is. And then I thought, what the heck am I doing this for? Why don't we just call this show Granny Rocks?
Yeah.
With Beth Green and co-hosted by James Maynard, and how much simpler that would be. And so this is, I hope, the last time, and I put it in a whole new Facebook event thingamajig graphic, and now that's what it is. So hopefully it'll stay that way. I mean, our Facebook page is called Granny Rocks, the music and message of Beth Green, and my website is called Granny Rocks at bethgreen.org. So we're all together.
Yes.
So that explains everything, I hope.
Granny Rocks.
I hope so. So.
In all the arenas.
Thank you. Okay, so now tonight to the topic at hand. And the topic at hand is when they become you, dealing with problems you thought happened only to other people. So this is going to be a very sobering show, but I hope we have a lot of fun doing it, right? So we have been talking a lot about the lack of caring in our society. I mean, we've been talking about that for years. I've been talking about that for years, as we have been promoting an inner revolution, changing the world from the inside out. But people still tend to think of ourselves first. In fact, sometimes we think of ourselves forever. First, last, and always. And that is a recipe for disaster. So I want to explain what I mean, because, see, a lot of us are thinking, well, those people have those problems, or those people have those problems. See, I don't have any of those problems, so I don't have to worry about everybody. I only have to worry about number one, right? Okay, well, sometimes life makes fools of us. So let me start by talking about some things, and then I'm going to get into the depth of something about the coronavirus. Climate change is impacting everyone. Flooding and drought can happen anywhere, including where rich people live. So they can't say, oh, well, yes, of course, the poorest countries and the poorest people always have the most problems, right? I mean, that'll always be the case. But you can have rising waters in Florida in very expensive neighborhoods, right?
Or New York City.
Right, or Venice, or anywhere.
Yeah.
So, see, flooding or drought, they can happen anywhere. And so suddenly, those poor people is us poor people, and we have to do something about climate change because it impacts everybody. Polluted air impacts everyone, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Gun violence threatens everyone.
Yep.
You never know whether it's going to happen to you or somebody you love, that there's going to be a shooting at the school or at the supermarket or the theater or whatever it is. So those poor people, it's like it used to be, the bad neighborhoods. You could get shot in a bad neighborhood. Well, now everything is a bad neighborhood because you can get shot anywhere. Okay. Now, loss of civil liberties could happen to anyone. And don't think it can't. Believe me, if the police arrest you or if the FBI comes after you and you are like a mistaken identity, you could have your life just turned upside down. And nobody is saying, I'm sorry, by the way. And you could be in jail.
Yeah.
For something you didn't even think about doing, much less did. And because this is the big point of our show tonight, is the lack of a social safety net could impact you, not just them, not just the poor. So now I'm going to read to you something that I hopefully can open. Okay, do something. Open. There it is.
There we go.
And now this is from the Reuters, which is a news service. And it's called, I'm not going to read you the whole article, but it is really worth reading. I just saw it today. Fragile safety net leaves U.S. economy vulnerable to coronavirus hit. Did you get that? The fragile safety net, what we've been talking about forever, that there isn't a safety net, that people, anyway. Here it says, the spreading coronavirus outbreak poses a double-barreled threat to U.S. workers who face not only the prospect of lost wages if they are forced to stay home during a quarantine, or if they stay home because everybody's sick or because they're sick, but also a fragile safety net to fall back on during such a crisis. Oh my God, you mean it isn't just them? So where is the rest of this article? How come it has disappeared? Why am I only
You go further down? There's a lot.
I'm trying. It didn't work before. Here we go. Unlike other rich countries, the U.S. provides thin and uneven social assistance for its 130 million full-time workers, and even less for the country's nearly 30 million part-time employees. Are you one of them, or are you related to one of them? There are also no federal laws requiring companies to provide paid sick leave or paid time off to care for sick relatives, leaving workers at the mercy of their employers and local governments. Low-wage and part-time workers in particular are likely to lack some of the workplace benefits if they contract the flu or whatever. The number of confirmed U.S. cases of COVID-19, the disease caused by the coronavirus, has jumped to more than 100, and 9 people have died. Well, as it happens, there's already 10. Economists worry that a large number of quarantined workers could sharply curb consumer spending, the pillar of the U.S. economy, and further widen the gap between the affluent and a working class that's already struggling to pay the bills. Lack of coverage represents a dual risk for the economy. I'm going to skip this. The U.S. Labor Department says 71% of American workers do not have the option of working from home. Many of those may work in the services, retail, or healthcare sectors, and or for companies that don't provide paid sick leave. Some 45% of workers surveyed by Prudential Group Insurance, obviously a very radical group, in late February said they were worried an outbreak would limit their ability to work, and 54% said they were not financially prepared to handle a contagious disease that might limit them. Health officials recommend that anyone exposed to COVID-19 be tested, and if infected, self-quarantine, right? But a lot of Americans don't have the option to self-quarantine, right? So, private sector workers are mostly dependent on their employers' policies, and roughly 1/4 of them do not get the benefit of
those policies.
Of those policies, yeah. And those with white-collar jobs, including finance and management, are the most likely to have paid sick leave, right? But others don't have it. And so on. I mean, it just goes on. Family and Medical Leave Act requires some companies to provide unpaid sick leave for an employee to care for a family member, but just a handful of states require all employers to offer paid family leave. Lost wages will put a hole in most low-income families' budget, and so on. Now, I'm jumping over a lot of this. Now they talk about health insurance. More than 27 million people in the United States do not have health insurance. Workers in that group may put off getting medical treatment because they're concerned they can't afford the bills. We have health insurance and we can't afford the bills. 1/4 of Americans say that they or a family member put off treating a serious medical condition in the past year. Dig this. 1/4 of Americans say that they or a family member put off treating a serious medical condition just in the last year because of the cost. And that figure goes up to 36% for households earning less than 40 grand. And while only 13% of households earning 100,000 or more say they would delay treatment, and so on. There it is. Okay, I'm back. So
We are vulnerable.
we are vulnerable. We are extremely vulnerable, and it's not just them. And of course, there are other potential global impacts. By the way, I don't see any comments. I see a lot of people watching. So if you have made a comment, I'm not seeing it. So it's okay. You don't have to, but I just want you to know I'm not seeing it, and that's why I'm not answering. And then, of course, is the question of how good your health insurance is and what would it cover anyway. So back to the global impacts. Okay, here's some other things. Think about this. People are anxious. Your taxi driver, as you're getting your taxi from the opera, the clerk who is handling your affairs at your financial services place, your hairdresser in Beverly Hills, everyone is more anxious, and you feel their anxiety as well as your own. The people teaching your children are out sick, and your kids suffer. This is as the virus spreads, which it will. Daycare centers could be impacted, or your nanny is sick, and suddenly you have inadequate childcare, not just them. Are you getting my point? Rich or poor, you might not be able to travel to your daughter's wedding. So you might not be able to go to your daughter's wedding, not just the poor people who can't go, right? The stock market could decline and cut into your savings. God forbid. Stores might run out of products that you want. The supply chain that feeds your production facility could be cut off. Oh, maybe you're manufacturing something and some of those parts come from China. Well, now what's going to happen to your business? So the supply chain that feeds the production of things that you like or need could also be cut off. And all of a sudden, it's not just the poor people who live in poor neighborhoods who go to theirs. They don't have any decent stores to shop because, what's happened to you now? Medical facilities could be overcrowded and the medical staff overworked, just like happens with poor people who go to the emergency room for their primary health care. And those facilities could be short-staffed because of a pandemic. Now, I'm not saying that these things are going to happen, but they could very well happen. And now, obviously, even though many of these would impact the poor more than the rich, some of those are going to impact the rich more than the poor. Like, I don't know, my nanny not coming or my stock portfolio going down. But anyway, what is my point? When there are cuts in food stamps, we want to think that the lack of quality food is a problem only for those people. But what if there isn't enough produce or dry goods in your grocery store? Right? Whole Foods has gone dry. When poor people lack adequate health care and there are cuts in Medicaid, which has been happening, we want to think that we will still be covered. Well, maybe we won't. You see what I mean? Because there might be too much of a strain on the healthcare system. When minorities or poor whites live in neighborhoods where there is more crime and they have trouble getting basic needs met, even just afraid to walk out the street, we want to think that we would never be caught in a situation where people are stressed enough to get violent with their neighbors. Hey, I wouldn't want to be around where I live if people get really stressed and people want to, start like getting their guns out, right? We have that. We live in a rural area. Well, probably guns are everywhere. When poor people can't handle their situations, we like to think that would never happen to us, that we would never be able to become homeless. We live in a society that woefully lacks a safety net for everybody, especially for the poor, but for everybody. So unless you're so rich that you're insulated from the fallout of hard times of any sort, the screwed up people who can't get it together, those other people over there, become us. This is an insane way to live and an insane way to run a society. If the coronavirus continues to spread through the U.S., as well as the rest of the world, we're going to see the holes in our economic and social system. So, guys, I think there's something wrong here because we haven't even gotten a like or a love or anything, but probably afterwards we'll see them. And I will answer you later, guys, if you make a comment or anything. And thank you for liking or loving. So when you go to the polls to pick your nominee or your president, think about that. Think about how quickly they can become us. If you're still not sure about that, ask the homeless person who used to be just like you. So, okay, they always say, but we can't afford a social safety network. Well, listen to this. This was, remember last time I shared with you some staggering statistics about, the people, they own more than 6.2, the wealthy 1% own more than 6.2 billion people out of 7.7 billion people in the world. Well, listen to this from the same article. Are you ready for this? This is going to give you a laugh. If you had saved $10,000 a day since 2500 BC, you'd still only have a fifth of the wealth of today's 5 richest people. Did you get that? Should I read that again? If you had saved $10,000 a day since 2500 BC,
Jesus.
you'd still only have a fifth of the wealth of today's 5 richest people. To put that into perspective, the article goes on. The Oxfam report claims that if you save 10,000 a day every day, while this calculation doesn't take interest or inflation into account, it's still a staggering statistic. So what do you think, guys? You think we need an inner revolution? Do you think we need a social revolution, a political revolution?
We sure need a stronger safety net.
Oh my God.
That's why we like to talk about, wouldn't we like to have a potluck society?
Yeah.
Where everybody's needs are taken care of when they come to the table, and those that have the most give the most, and those that have the least have their needs met.
Exactly. We believe in a world that takes care of people and the earth first.
Yeah.
And that would be better for everybody. And I'm hoping that this show is bringing home the message that we could become them overnight.
Yeah.
And let's get together and support the people who are supporting us. So, like the show, love the show, comment on the show. I will answer your comments later because I'm sure at some point I will see some comments.
And likes and loves.
And likes and love. And please share this program and come back. Oh, so don't forget, Thursdays we also live stream Dreams of Peace improvisational piano, where I play the piano improvisationally. And
every Monday and Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, we have this show, Granny Rocks.
Yes. Okay. We love you. Thank you for all your support.
Yes, thanks very much for coming.
Hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye for now.